Hello, and welcome to Saving People, Queering Things, a supernatural podcast. We were previously known as Driver Picks the Podcast, and the episode you're about to listen to was recorded under that name. Though our name has changed as of season 3, our show hasn't changed that much. Our structure and theme-based discussions are the same, and we're so glad you're here. Now, let's get on the road. Hello, and welcome to Driver Picks the Podcast, the show where we talk about ghosts, road trips, and free will through every episode of the TV series Supernatural. Today, we are exploring Season 2, Episode 4, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, through the theme of willpower. I'm Abigail, your host, and joining me today for the second time is Noah, back for more shenanigans. Woohoo! Welcome.
I'm good at those shenanigans. Some insight into Sam and Dean.
Yeah, we get some more like fallout from the end of season 1, beginning of season 2, everything that's happened.
Which I definitely didn't watch in between recording the penultimate episode and this episode, but their dad died, so I mean I was right there. It's okay. I didn't know that that Dean died until later on in the episode when we talked about it, and I was like, oh, I mean, that explains some things.
Kind of. It's a little like, that's a little dicey, kind of. But that does lead us well into our series recap.
Perfect.
Which will catch you right up. So This is the road so far for season 2. So after spending most of his adult life hunting for the demon who killed his wife, John Winchester is dead, having traded his life for Dean's, and the demon is still at large. Despite having no new leads on the demon, Sam and Dean, both avoiding their grief in different ways, are still on the road. However, recent experiences suggest that monster hunting may not be as morally simple as John had taught them, after they have a blowout fight with another hunter in the previous episode, and ultimately decide to let a group of non-murderous vampires go free. For now, though, most things that are not human are monsters that need to be ganked, and the Winchesters are continuing to hunt them, while getting closer to understanding what actually happened to John and where the demon might be now.
Ooh, okay. I like it.
And that brings us to this episode and to our 30-second recap. We both go,
okay. Yeah, okay. Ooh, okay, yeah, easy.
What order do you want to go in?
I'll go first. Knock
it
out real quick.
Love it. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so Sam and Dean go to see their mom's grave, and on the way there they see the grave of this other girl who coincidentally died pretty recently and is haunting everybody, or it's just haunting. It came back in general, and that's a problem. And Dean is obsessing over that instead of facing his own problems with how he survived and his mom's death and dad's death. And he and Sam figure it out and kill the bad guy in the end. 30 seconds.
Nice. Like, very complete.
Yeah. It wasn't chronological, but it got there.
Hey, these stories don't unfold chronologically half the time anyway.
There we go.
You got there. I'll see if I can fill in some details.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay. Let me.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so Sam and Dean are visiting their mom's grave because Sam wants to, but Dean mostly wants to avoid it. And so he manages to find them a case where this guy has brought back, using necromancy, his kind of girlfriend, and she goes around and starts killing everyone who she had beef with in her previous life. And that's obviously a problem. So Sam and Dean are like, hunt her down. They manage to trap her and trick her and take her out. And then they have an emotional conversation about how they feel about their dad's death.
Hell yeah.
There we go. It is now time for us to discuss this episode through our chosen theme. This week, our theme is willpower. Yeah. Love the sound effects.
I had
great.
to do it once.
It's such a good transition in, right?
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to start off with?
Okay. Willpower was a pretty interesting subject to start off with, I thought, because this was I mean, the whole villain, Angela, seems to be entirely existent upon willpower, like because of Neil wanting her back and him exerting his willpower when the spell and whatnot, he brought her back. And so she's kind of just existing through sheer will to get revenge, I guess,
Yeah.
on whoever
Yeah.
she's been wronged by.
Yeah. That's interesting because it's like the two different pieces of willpower. It's like Neil's willpower is what brings her back. And then, but what seems to be driving her once she's back is not like her humanity, it's her just will to kind of make right the things that were wrong in terms of even like her death. Like she tries to solve those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's dangerous too, because Neil thinks the whole time that he's in control, and he's not. I mean, in the slightest.
No.
He started something, but it's way out of his hands at that point.
Yeah, I think he thinks that he's gonna get her back and she's gonna be like she was.
Yeah, but even if she was like she was, she still wouldn't want to be with him. Like that was the whole problem when she was alive, is that her willpower was stronger, or maybe not necessarily stronger, but anti how he wanted it to be.
Yeah. So that's a really good point.
Like, because she already saw him as such a great friend, and he had her back, which is not wrong of her in any sort of way, because I mean that's life. Is sometimes people are friends and sometimes they're not. Like, he just couldn't accept that, and even when she died, he was like, I can't accept that. So he tried to bring her back, but he already wanted to bring her back, but different. So it was already dicey.
Right. He's already trying to like exert his willpower over hers, and already trying to alter who she is, because if he doesn't, it doesn't do any good.
Exactly.
And so that gets him into trouble, because, well, again, and also the whole thing where the only way to bring her back is by like using a spell, by necromancy, by using something that's already pretty dicey. And like the very fact that everything around, like all the plants are dying, everything around the grave is dead, like those are some pretty like big red flags.
Red flags.
But he didn't. I mean,
he was a little too Twitter pated to see otherwise.
Yeah.
He was happy that she was giving him what he wanted, and he thought he got it. But she was like, yeah, I'll do that, I guess, if I get to come back to life. Sure.
Yeah. And he seems like he's even convincing himself. Like the first scene when we realize it's him, the first scene where they're talking about Matt, and he's kind of pushing a little bit, like he wants to find out if she had anything to do with Matt's death, and she denies it, and he like gives that one up way too easy,
way too fast, because like he can get some.
Yeah, he wants. Yeah, exactly. He's convinced that he has to convince himself, because if he doesn't convince himself that she's not responsible, then she is responsible, and then ultimately he's responsible because he brought her back.
And he can't handle that, can't face that fact.
No.
If he does, then that means that he's in way over his head, and
she can't be controlled.
Lean into it and say, well, let's make out a little bit.
Say, oh, well, what if we just be together and everything else kind of doesn't really matter.
It'll be fine. I'm sure.
So concerning. Everything about his character, like from the first scene too, like the first scene we get with him, like he's being really supportive, and that's fantastic. But the first shot we get, like when she takes his hands and is kind of like, clearly for her, that's a grasping onto some like stability and comfort when she's just been through something kind of traumatic with her boyfriend cheating on her. And the way he looks at her, and the way he kind of like, it's not about comforting her. Like he was always comforting her to try and get something from it.
He's making the move while she's trying to recover from this trauma,
Yeah.
And that was already sus.
Yeah.
So he instigated her death in the first place by not helping that situation.
Yeah. The fact that, yeah.
Not that he instigated Matt cheating, but
No.
um,
No, but he doesn't help this situation.
no.
Like there's probably multiple ways they could have done that wouldn't have, like, she didn't want to see Matt and he's banging on the door. Like you could have just like, I don't know, not answered the door. Just like wait till
Yeah.
he gets tired and leaves.
Yeah, you could have just said,
Or
hey,
like
I'm
call
not
the
gonna
core,
answer the
like,
door, call
yeah,
the cops.
yeah, call, open the door, crack, go, leave, or I'm calling the cops, door slam. You suddenly don't have this problem. And maybe she ends up with you anyway, if she's interested in that. And
Maybe.
if not, then at least you're like a decent person.
Yeah.
And you're not contributing to two deaths, which is like,
if he cared about her for her, then
Yeah.
he would want to protect her no matter what the situation was.
Yeah, and he wouldn't be using that as a way of like, oh, great, her boyfriend's actually a cheater. Maybe.
This is my moment to sneak in there.
Yeah, because
Nah.
gross. Gross.
Yeah, like, okay, that's a human being you're talking about. Okay, cool.
Yeah, like, please don't. Also, I mean, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, and it's not really related to willpower, but like, it's just, I don't appreciate the portrayal of either of the women in this episode, because
No.
they exist entirely to be like sexualized or brutalized or both. And
Yeah,
it's just, ugh.
it's just disappointing. They
Yeah.
are both based down to just, well, this person just seemed to be upset about them being sad, and then they die. Oh no, not quite. The boy saved her.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's also like the idea of like these two best friends, these roommates, and like one of them cheating, like one of them sleeping with their roommate and best friend's like boyfriend. I don't know. I feel like it's just, I don't know.
Wait, it's not. It's overused.
It's overused.
It's over. I mean, it's cliche.
It's cliche, yeah. And it didn't have a lot of like depth to it in this storyline. Like I'm not opposed to that storyline being a thing, but it's very like neither of them had any personality or
Mm-mm. No, they were just shuffled under.
yeah.
Well, pick a name. There's a woman.
Yeah, they
Tell
almost
her the lines. Like
they even look kind of like they're like they physically look very similar. They dress like it's yeah.
they have basic white girl names.
Yeah, yeah. It's Angela and what's the other?
I'm sorry, Lindsay. I still care. I'm still friends.
Yes, we're sorry to anyone who has either of those names. I mean, to be
I know
fair,
some
both of
Angelas,
those.
But we're not tight. I'm tight with Lindsay though. Oops.
Okay, there we go. You've covered your bases there.
She knows.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, both of the boys' names are also pretty basic white boy names, Matt and Neil.
That's true. Matt and Neil, they kind of suck as characters too.
Yeah, they do. They really do.
Full offense, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we've talked a bunch about Neil, but like Matt's also pretty crappy. He just gets
Honestly, he cheated on her and then shows up mad that she's mad.
Yeah, unclear as to what he was showing up for. Like I had forgotten, because again, it's been a long time since I've seen this episode, and I forgot honestly that it was a cheating storyline. And I couldn't remember if it was a like she had broken up with him and he was mad and wanted her back. I couldn't remember like what the story beats were, and they don't actually tell you until pretty far in the episode that it was a cheating situation. So you just get this like impression of like she is of like this man is showing up angry and violent, and that's like kind of all you know about their relationship until the car crash, which is just like pretty intense.
And it really was unnecessarily aggressive. I mean, he's just so aggressive.
He's so aggressive.
He comes in out of nowhere, and it's like, you chose violence today. Please stop.
Yeah.
Sit down.
Yeah, exactly. And then kind of creepy afterwards. I mean, like, I get it. Like you were in a relationship, but like the scene where he's watching the old videos of the two of them together.
Oh yeah.
And he's
After
also
he cheated.
exactly. I'm like I get it. You like just because you like screwed up doesn't mean that you aren't going to mourn this person that you lost. But it's weird. Yeah, it's hard to feel a lot of
Type of
sympathy.
video that
Yeah.
he chose is like, it's a weird vibe putting that on in your living room. While
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
sitting on the I don't know. It's weird.
It's weird. It's just like, yeah.
Everyone grieves in their different ways, I guess, but like, damn, Matt.
But yeah, like also on the whole thing of like, you know, you're not valuing the person for like who they were when they were alive, and like now you're mourning her, but you didn't value her when she was alive, or you wouldn't have like cheated on. Yeah.
Never know what you got till it's gone and slices your throat open.
Yeah, you know.
No big.
I mean, this is the thing. Other like Angela, like obviously, yeah. Like they're like obviously we have like 3 victims in this episode. Like all 3 of these people die. Angela, Matt, and Neil all die. But Angela is like the biggest victim in this episode, really. Because she is the one that gets her willpower stripped from her, both by the fact that she's multiple times in her relationship before the episode even started, in her ex showing up and like not leaving her alone, and in
Neil was intending to remove her willpower again, like in the way that he was handling her coming to his house. Like, in that whole scenario, he was going to, but didn't get the chance to because she crashed, which is another instance of like her willpower getting taken away. Car crash, boom, done. And
then she's brought back again, and she even says later on, like she says right before she's killed, she says, "I'm still a person." Which is like such an interesting line when you think about willpower, because it's such an exertion of like, I'm still a person, like basically meaning like the implication is I'm still someone who can make decisions. I'm still someone who
I'm only worth something because I'm something that can make decisions. Like that's what makes me worth something.
Yeah. Or that's what makes me not even necessarily just like worth something, but that's what makes me a person, is like I still have agency
fair.
to be a person.
Tries to grab that, and they say
and they say no. They say no because you keep killing people, which anyway, I want to ask you a question about that, but I want to do it later, a specific point later. So I won't ask it now. We'll come back to it. I wanted to talk about, so we talked about willpower in terms of like the plot of the specific episode, but like the overarching theme of this episode really is connected to the boys and what the fight they have like 4 different times in this episode about grief and hunting and
using hunting to get away with not processing your grief. Yeah.
I was trying to think about that in terms of willpower.
Well, I saw that in the way that Dean was coming with Sam in the first place shows that, you know, Dean's kind of making it feel like he's there against his will, but he came out there knowing that it was going to be emotional for Sam, and Sam might need someone to be there for him, or someone to make sure he's safe. And so it's really the strongest showing of his will that he really wants to go, that he did go with Sam, even though he's going to complain the whole time.
Right.
To make it sound like he doesn't want to. He wants to be there more than anything. Not for the same reasons as Sam, but I mean, he needed to be there for Sam.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing with both. That's an interesting part where both their wills are sort of like pushed up against each other, because Sam's like, I'm going. I don't care if you are. I'm going. If you don't want to go, drop me off and I'll hitchhike. And Dean's like, I don't want to go, but I will, begrudgingly.
Just so you don't have to walk. Ugh.
Yeah, and so you're not, and like the implication being also so that you're like not alone. Also, the last time Sam hitchhiked was in season 1, and it ended with him meeting meeting someone who turned out to be a Dean, who he met Meg the last time he hitchhiked.
Oh.
So
Nice.
I think there might also be Dean just being like, I'm not letting you, not like letting you hitchhike. This seems like doesn't end well for us.
That tracks.
But it's very interesting. Yeah, because Dean is willing to like bend his will to go with what Sam wants to do, but he also is still he's still like, they get there and it's not like he's willing to go to the grave. He is still using all of his willpower to be like, I am going to be in this situation because I have to be, but my willpower is going to be all directed towards ignoring my trauma. And all I'm going to do is like look around and find things related to hunting because that's my primary method of like
coping. Yeah. Just coping with the life in general. Any emotions Dean has, channel that into hunting.
Yeah. And we saw that in the previous episode too, the previous episode where they meet another hunter, and we have a couple of scenes where we also see Dean's like focus on hunting as a means of escape, and we see the like this extra bit of like violence is not quite the right word, but this like this intensity, and Sam kind of identifies it in this episode where he goes like, you know, you're scaring me because when you're hunting, like you are scary because of like the focus you're putting on it, the violence, like he's like, I know you were gonna have to find something to kill because that's your
he can't be without it.
Yeah, which is scary. But it also gets them a legitimate case, which is the like hard thing because he's getting that confirmation that this is not a bad way to deal with this trauma, because it's like they save one life. They save Lindsay's life.
Yeah, they save Lindsay, and they don't really, I mean, they're too late for Matt, and then Neil was way in too deep. So
and
they did good.
Yeah, they did their best. Honestly, they probably saved the only person they could have saved in this episode, based on their own choices.
Yeah, pretty good track record there, guys.
Pretty good track record.
One thing I did notice about Willpower is Angela's dad. Without Angela there, without her presence in his life, he seems to have lost his willpower. Like whenever the boys go to his house, he's broken, or to the school, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He's broken. He's sad, lost without her. Totally understandably, but like, he seems to be running on muscle memory, not much willpower there.
That's a really good way of describing kind of the opposite of willpower, that whole like running on muscle memory. I like that. And he definitely is. He even says like, she was my whole life, and she was the source of his energy and his focus, and now he doesn't have that and he's floundering. And it's,
and then Dean and Sam go in and make that worse by accusing him of,
of doing it. particularly Dean. It's funny as like a scene. It's a funny scene. Like but poor dude. But like they go in and they're just like, I'm like, it's funny in this show because there are some episodes where they're really good at interacting with people and they are strategic. They've clearly thought it through. They're within whatever persona they're playing. They play it well. They don't like, they have to usually ask some weird questions, but sometimes they manage to like do that in a way that doesn't arouse just a ton of suspicion. In this episode, it's like terrible.
They were off their game.
And like Dean particularly, but Sam's not a whole lot better. Like, did they talk about the game plan at all before they, like, clearly no.
No, it didn't seem like it.
It seemed like they pulled up, walked in, and were like, maybe did you kill your daughter? We're like, maybe don't lead with that.
Stormed up to the door and he said, I'm gonna ask him some questions. And Sam said, what's the plan? He said, I'm gonna ask him questions. That's it. That's all he got.
That's all they got. And then the second time too, like they go both times, it's just bad.
It's bad.
This
It's bad.
this dad deserves better than yeah. But at
This
least
poor guy was so confused going about his day because he didn't even know about the whole rest of it that
Oh,
happened. So
no.
when he hears in the news or from somebody that Neil died, then he's like, "Wow, that's crazy." I still miss Angela though. Like he has no idea that she came back and then was gone again.
Which,
Like,
I guess small graces of this episode is that he didn't have to get re-traumatized by like seeing her and then seeing her die again or hearing about her
Yeah.
dying again.
yeah,
At least she didn't have any beef with him.
yeah. He was a pretty good dad, I guess.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
look at that.
Look at that. Look at that.
Positive
yeah,
dad
but-
role models and
well, oh,
supernatural.
yeah, hey, exactly. We got 0 scenes of them together, but we know he was a good dad because she didn't go and try and crazy murder him.
Yep, but we got Dean yelling at him. So, oops.
Neil was his TA. I just
Oh,
realized
shit,
that. So that's actually
right.
really gonna suck.
Okay, so yeah, he will hear about that.
He will definitely hear about it. And he'll also hear that Neil died in the graveyard near where his daughter was buried. So that's
And there's some more fresh dirt there, I guess. That's weird. But
yeah.
we're gonna move past that.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully he doesn't think too hard about that. Because, just stay out of it. Just stay out of all
Don't
of
worry
that
about it.
supernatural stuff. Don't worry about it. Just like go back
You
to your
should move.
yeah, actually move. Yeah, actually, how about that? Just go teach somewhere else in some other town.
Just pack up and move.
And maybe just like don't teach any of the stuff around like ancient necromancy rituals. Just don't any of
be
those books, just get
teaching
rid of them.
kids Greek necromancy. Don't be doing that.
So specific. It's so
People
specific.
don't learn their lesson.
No, they really don't. If there's a necromancy ritual out there, someone's going to use it to try and bring back someone that's dead.
Amen.
Because people have no willpower to resist bad decision making in this show.
Hey, yeah, you know what? That's fact. Oh, in the show.
In the show, I mean,
life,
also
but
in general in life, it's a reflection of the reality that.
yeah, that's fair. Okay, one thing I wanted to say about the show. When do they learn how to make silver bullets? Because that should have been season 1. They figure out how to kill as many demons as possible and make the stuff themselves.
Yeah. Even the whole like rock salt in guns thing is a season 2.
Does that come
2
about?
thing?
Thing?
They do start doing that, which can like blast demons away.
Any demon.
And a lot of spirits as well. Yeah, the silver bullets thing, like that takes them a while. I don't know exactly the first time we see silver bullets. But silver bullets, also like the lore around what kills what, sometimes it's just very specific and also very random. Like in this episode particularly, it's super weird with the like lore around what's going to kill this undead thing.
Yeah, they were saying like some people say burn them, some people say stake through the heart, headshot. Like
yeah, like there's just so many options. And they just sort of like, I think they just sort of get the right one kind of by accident. Like they don't give a good explanation. They're just like, this is the one that shows up a lot, so probably it'll work.
And they didn't really talk about a plan. They did the headshot. I feel like they tried a few and they were like, oh, not that one, not that one. Hey, there we go.
I'm really lucky that, yeah.
That it was one of them. And
that it was one of them.
A different kind of Greek necromancy spell and it wasn't like fire. They didn't seem to have any fire.
It's true. It's weird that they didn't even try that because that's been a pretty standard practice. Like
most demons burn something.
Yeah, most monsters are at least hurt by fire. It slows them down, even if it doesn't like take them out.
Most things.
Yeah, and I feel like, which it goes along with the scene where they are talking about, like right at the beginning when they're like, oh, we're gonna have to go and dig up the body, like dig up the bones, is what Dean says, and then Sam's like,
burn the bones.
Sam's like, we can't do that. Sam's like, all like, it's like she was just buried. It's gonna be a body, not bones.
It's like, bro.
I'm like, this is not that unusual for you. Like, I get it. That's gross. Like, I get it that's super gross and creepy.
I wouldn't want to.
I wouldn't want to do it either. But it's not that far out of what they've had to do many times.
Yeah.
And
Probably burned dogs. They probably burned some sort of effigy.
oh
They've
yeah,
probably burned any
Sam just has a
number.
very big reaction to it,
Yeah.
which
Weird.
is weird, but
I guess so.
I guess so.
Maybe he's traumatized too and working through that. And
Which honestly, fair.
yeah.
Very fair. Burning burning bones is a lot like it's still creepy and gross, but it's
But
feels a lot less closer to them being a human than someone who's just recently died. Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget too
Understand.
because this show goes on for so long and they get so comfortable with certain things around like how to kill monsters or things like that, where these things don't phase them, whereas like we're still early enough in the show that
this is still season 1 or 2.
yeah,
Season 2.
early season 2, like they're still phased by a lot of things. Like they're still like, oh, that's uncomfortable, that's gross. They like, which I like because it's, I don't know, feels a little more relatable. Like
some
no,
character growth.
yeah, exactly. There the only other thing I like wanted to talk about in terms of theme, and it's kind of connected to willpower and kind of not, but like we get this line at multiple points that what's dead should stay dead. And we get that line like near the beginning, we get it in the middle, and we get it again at the end.
It's like a mantra.
It's like a mantra coming from Dean. And we don't realize why he's like keeps saying it until the end. Like the first couple of times he's very directly connecting it to the current case going.
Yep.
And then the second time you're like, he's talking about the current case, but you're like, are you actually talking about John? Are you talking, what are you actually talking about? And then by the end you're like, oh, you're actually talking about yourself.
The third time you're like, whoa, okay, you just gotta tell us. Just tell us. We're not getting it. And then the fourth time is he like, I should have stayed dead. It's like,
you're like, oh,
okay.
Which is really interesting because in the season 2 premiere, which is the episode where he almost dies, like we get sort of he's going to die. He doesn't actually die. Like he's in a coma. He's in a kind of he kind of has an out of body state experience where he's like seeing his body and seeing him all hooked up to machines. He's seeing Sam. He's trying to communicate with Sam. He is, that's the premiere episode of this season. But he's not dead. Like at no point is he actually dead. He's just like, he's not, but there is a lot of evidence in that episode from the doctors, from him talking to a Reaper that basically say like, the Reaper says to him, like, you're gonna die, like you are going to die, like you're not like going to make it out of here. Not even purgatory, but just like you're currently kind of caught between life and death, and as soon as you let go, you're gonna be dead. Waiting
for the clock to run out, and then we'll pick you up, kind of thing.
Pretty much. And she, because the Tessa, the Reaper, offers him the choice, says, you can come with me, quietly, or you can become a spirit. And you know how that generally goes. You can be miserable and you can be a spirit forever. And he doesn't actually have a chance to like actually make a choice about that because John goes and makes a deal
to switch.
So it's interesting that in this time, like, and he obviously doesn't know any of that. He just knows he was supposed to die. He didn't die. John died. So it's interesting that he says I was dead because he wasn't actually.
You were on your way.
But he was on his way. So it's just interesting. I just thought it was like an interesting language choice. And yeah, that he like points out, he's like, it wasn't natural. I was dead. I should have stayed dead.
That is an interesting use of phrase because it's one thing to say that since he was, comatose and then it feels like he was basically dead, but for him to specifically say, I was dead, I should have stayed dead.
Yeah.
Is odd.
Yeah, like, you're right. Right?
Okay, but you weren't.
It's like the interpretation that thing he's jumping to is really interesting.
Because, no offense, but just because you have an out-of-body experience doesn't mean that you were dead.
No.
That's achievable by many different means.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. And they don't even know, like they don't know what John did. They just know the Colt was gone, John was dead, Dean is alive. So like, and like he is correctly extrapolating, like dad did something to save me, but they don't actually know that at this point. And it's interesting that he like his first instinct is to go like, oh, should have been me. Dad must have made a deal. I deserve to be dead. I should have stayed dead.
then Dad would be here.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
wouldn't really solve anything because Sam still wouldn't be safe.
No, and also Sam is like honestly less safe in that situation based on what we know of John. Like I don't think John was going to be like stellar parent of the year if Dean suddenly died. Like I think they would have both gone. I think both him and Sam would have gone off the rails even more than they already do.
Yeah. Then they would have gotten mad at each other and then gone solo, and it just would have been bad.
It would have been bad. But Dean doesn't connect those dots at all. Nope. Yep. He's just like, I should be dead. It's just interesting how it's just interesting in this episode. I couldn't really connect it to willpower, but I guess the willpower to like believe what you've been telling yourself about the situation. What were you gonna say?
I had said it seems like or I'd written down, it seems like a coping mechanism, like that he came to that conclusion about this case and then is kind of repeating it again, and it's going to make it right here because I'm the mistake. I'm the exception that proves the rule. Like, so his willpower comes out in the way that he's trying to force that rule because he feels so badly about his dad messing it up for him and for all of them.
Ooh, that's really interesting. That's why it's so important, this case.
Yeah, and that's why he repeats it so many times, and it gets stronger every time. Kind of, he's feeling guilty about it.
Yeah,
and wants to make it right.
Yeah, which is also maybe why he's not letting himself like actually be sad about John, because if he, he doesn't deserve, like, if it. Yeah, and also if he is sad about John, like he doesn't like I think he almost doesn't feel like he deserves to be sad about it because he's like, well, it wouldn't have even happened if it wasn't for me. Like I'm responsible for it. And
so I can't apologize.
No, exactly. And I can't feel bad and I can't be sad that he's gone or be sad that we lost him because like I'm directly responsible for the fact that we lost him. And he's clearly trying to communicate that with Sam the whole episode, but is not willing to say it.
Nope, not at all. Yeah. These boys need to talk to each other more.
Yeah. They need to have more of the conversations that they have at the end. Yeah. Which they finally do. I'm
so proud.
I know. Growth might be the wrong word, but it's a step towards emotional vulnerability.
A step.
Yeah. It's a step. They don't really know what to do with that.
Every step's important.
Every step is important. Just start with one thing. If you're struggling to say how you really feel, just start with one thing. Even if you're like, I'm going to say this thing, and like Dean says, I'm going to say that he says it. I
should be dead.
It's like, I think I should be dead. What are you going to say to fix that? You can't say anything to fix that.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's a good question. What are you? Oh, and then they just said nothing. I was like, oh. And
then they roll credits on the episode. They're like, we have no solutions for this, which, to be fair, there aren't really any.
No.
Both because they don't really know what's going on, and because that's kind of how grief and guilt work, is that there's not really an easy answer. So next we're going to move into our going meta segment. We're tracking lore, Bechdel test, pop culture, all that fun stuff. First up, death counter. How many deaths do we have in this episode?
We got Angela, Matt, Neil.
I think that's it. Yeah, so Angela twice, kind of.
Lindsay didn't die. The dad didn't die.
Yeah,
no animals died.
No animals died. No other deaths, and it's very self-contained. It's not historical spirit or anything, or ghost or anything like a lot of them are.
No, it's a 3-day-old spirit.
Yeah, or not even spirit. It's like a
reanimated corpse.
It's fun. And no major character deaths in this episode. Other than, the conversation about with Dean saying he thinks that he was dead. So
responsible for killing his dad too. So
yeah. References. But
yeah.
Um
Bechdel test. There were barely 2 female characters. They
yeah.
had a conversation about I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah, which was about
the
men. Which
so
was about
so still doesn't work.
hard fail.
At one point she said, I'm home, and that wasn't about a man.
Right.
No, that's a stretch.
That's a stretch. It's not really a conversation.
No, that's a statement, a declaratory statement followed by a punch or an assault in general.
Yeah.
So no, that one.
I think this one is a pretty good fail, and based on the fact that yes, they both have names, but they're really
brief,
stock kind of characters. Yeah, they're really brief. They're not really given any personality.
More depth after she died.
Yeah.
Than before.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. Do better, Supernatural writers.
Come on.
And they will proceed to do about the same or worse until occasionally they do better. In terms of lore, for our lore check, we kind of talked a little bit about this, but yeah, there's first time we've seen a reanimated corpse specifically, and it's really unclear still of other than the kind of stake how they killed them
or how it came about, because all they knew is it was ancient Greek lettering and a necromancy spell. There was really no explanation of where Neil got the spell, or how the dad knew stuff about necromancy from ancient Greece.
Yeah, that's very niche sort of field of study to be ancient Greece. I'm that tracks. Ancient Greek necromancy, that's very specific.
Obviously, we're the exceptions to the rule, because we talk about Greek necromancy all the time.
Yeah, of course, it's a topic of interest.
Everybody, I guess.
So, no, I guess
I recognized it instantly, but
yeah, those symbols were very familiar.
They jumped out.
They jumped out. Actually. Okay, so I did actually take, when I was in high school, I did take 2 years of ancient Greek.
Oh, yep, I did. I took alphabet and the epsilon, all that.
Classic Christian homeschooler, second language, right?
Yeah. Did Greek, did Latin for a bit, Spanish.
So there's basically what we're saying is that we are experts in the
Obviously.
Kind of ancient languages represented in the show,
specifically the necromancy form,
specifically. Right, yeah, specifically. Ancient Greek is not a thing, we'll see it in Supernatural a handful of times, but it's not as common. We had a lot more Latin in Supernatural lore.
Latin is what I expect more.
Yeah, and when they said Greek, I was like, we have ancient Greek necromancy? Didn't remember that was a thing. I think it's because we don't have it very often.
No, I dig it though.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of other lore in this episode, is there? Anything else you can think of?
Not much. They talk about stuff they know about zombies and recognizing signs of spirits existing, the dead ground, plants dying, all that.
Right.
They recognize that, but that's background lore.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the whole Dean standing in a circle of things that are dead is very, if you've watched later on in the show, there is a scene that again has Dean standing in the middle of a whole bunch of things that have died, a whole bunch of plant life that has died. Okay. It's a very interesting visual. When I saw it, I was like, oh, I didn't realize we had this visual before, as well as when we have it in season 4.
They call back to that later.
Yeah, very subtly, and it's not the exact same situation, but it's still kind of connected to this whole concept of what's dead will stay dead. And if you've seen season 4, you'd reference that.
Are you heading after work?
Let's do it.
Okay, what?
It's 6:35.
Do replay. Have fun. Okay, I gotta head out 15 minutes.
Cool.
But we got time.
Oh yeah, we'll get through it all.
We got this.
Yeah, but that's like something that I noticed. If you're listening and you've seen season 4, the first episode of season 4, you will probably know what I'm talking about. But it's just an interesting visual connected to the idea of like what's dead will stay dead, because it's also an episode about a kind of reanimation, yeah, or resurrection, or however you're thinking about it. It's in an episode that's called Lazarus Rising. Very interesting, unintentional supernatural paralleling happening.
Okay.
But that's all I'll say on that. So in terms of locations, this episode takes place in Kansas, at the place where Mary was buried, or not Mary. Mary was not buried. The place where they erected a tombstone for Mary, and it said it was Mary's uncle, which is again really interesting because we don't ever hear about this uncle again.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Is that Bobby that they're talking about? That's
no, because Bobby's not related. They're talking about like a biological, technically it would be like a biological great uncle that they would have, which is really interesting. And brief spoiler alert, so don't listen if you don't want a really basic spoiler. We find out later that Mary's family were hunters. So we don't know. Again, we don't ever find out about this particular uncle, if this particular uncle was a hunter, if it was just like a person that was like she should have a gravestone. It's just very interesting. It's very interesting that John didn't do it. It's very interesting that someone else did.
The boys didn't do it.
The boys didn't. I mean, the boys were like,
well. I mean, at this point, like, right. If it still wasn't there now, then they would.
Yeah, but I mean, there was no bot. There was never any body or anything. It's just very interesting. In terms of the filming locations, it's filmed at a botanical garden. So the cemetery is actually a botanical garden in Vancouver. I don't know if it's actually also a cemetery. I don't actually think it is. I think they may have. I think those may be props entirely. And then it's filmed at like a couple of residential, like manor kind of houses. Again, those neighborhoods. Yep, all Vancouver.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Nothing out of the ordinary. Vancouver. I have been to Van Dusen. I have been to those botanical gardens like once, but I was pretty little. I don't remember it very well.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's cool. Pop culture. I know you have a note for this.
Ooh, yeah. Pop culture. The only thing that I caught Dean at one point is like, haven't you ever seen Pet Sematary? About, dead things being in the ground and it killing them, and reanimating corpses, that being bad. And like, damn, you didn't even watch Stephen King? Wow. that was it. That was all I got though.
I think that's pretty much. I think there's one other one, but I don't remember what it was. And it's again a pretty niche one. Pet Sematary is a good, and again, we're getting another reference of like Dean loves horror movies. And of course, Sam doesn't know it because Sam doesn't like horror movies. We also know that by this point.
He doesn't like so many things, clowns and
which stuff. I mean, not liking horror movies when your life is like kind of a horror movie, I can respect that.
Yeah, fair. Can't blame him.
Nope, can't blame him there.
Clowns are scary anyway.
So. Clowns are terrifying. Honestly, I'm a little concerned about people who aren't at least a little bit nervous about clowns. At least as they're generally presented.
Comfortable with clowns, I don't trust.
Last up, gaydar, sexuality and gender connections. We talked a bit about. Oh, actually, this is where my one other pop culture reference comes in, and it's connected to this as well. Is Dean, when they are talking about the girl, when they realize that she had been cheated on, Dean says, "Hell hath no fury," which is the full quote of that is "Hell hath no fury than a woman scorned," and that's because that phrase comes from a play called The Mourning Bride. It's from the early 18th century. Again, I mean, a pretty common, it's a pretty well-known quote.
Yeah, everybody's heard it by this point.
Yeah, it's very connected. It's interesting that that's Dean's reference there, and connecting that to the gender piece. Obviously, we talked a little bit earlier about how shitty this episode is for its presentation of
gender in
general.
And
yeah. And Dean makes a dumb ladies first comment at Sam.
Yeah.
which is just like unnecessary and par for the course for 2006.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one was surprised. I don't really have anything else to say about that other than
I really thought for Lindsay's whole introduction that there was going to be a subplot about Lindsay actually being into it, but it was she was sad about Matt dying, and I didn't pick up on it. Until
yeah.
they were like, well, she's just
I know they had opportunity there to make it more interesting, her relationship with Angela.
Yeah.
And that could have been, I think, given both of them more personality and like, you know, I could have gone with like her Angela still trying to kill Lindsay, but maybe for some more interesting reason than the reason they went with. They went for the really low hanging fruit there.
Yeah.
So we have two more things today. First, we have a little Q&A. So I'm going to ask you a question related to something the episode doesn't answer and get your thoughts. And my question, this is where I'm coming back to something I said earlier. When Angela says, when Angela meets Sam in the graveyard and says, I'm still a person, please. Like she's pleading with him not to kill her, presumably. Like, I mean, I think that one's pretty obvious. But my question for you is like, what impression do you get? Is she lying or is she telling the truth? Like, does she actually believe that? Is she telling the truth? Like, why is she appealing in this way? Because I thought it was really interesting and I didn't have an answer.
That is interesting. I do like that. I would say she doesn't care if it's true or not. She doesn't know if it's true. She doesn't care if it's true. She's saying whatever she thinks she needs to say to be able to make it out of there and alive-ish.
Right. It's a survival response, not actually.
It definitely didn't seem genuine. It felt like she was just trying to say something to tug on his heartstrings a little bit.
Right. Appeal to his sense of humanity by being like, I'm a human too, and I was so recently alive. Like I'm still a person.
She's not human by how she interacted with Neil and Matt, like slash, and she can do things that normal ass humans can't. Like she's more than that. She's different.
And even if she wasn't a violent person before her death, something about being brought back has made her
unstable
and like unable to kind of even have the willpower to stop herself from being violent.
That block is kind of the restrictions that she willed on herself to be a good person before are gone. And so I like that. I like the idea that she doesn't actually maybe know or care and that this is just a survival. I think maybe she thought of it in the moment and said, maybe that's or I think I am still a human. I want to be, could be, but I don't think she is.
Cool.
It's a good question.
I like that. I like that answer. It's a good answer. So our last thing today is going to be choosing our theme songs for the episode. So based on our discussion, based on anything that we've talked about or anything we thought of during the episode, I do have a song in mind. I'm just going to find it here. And if you have a song in mind,
not one that jumps out.
That's all good.
Jumps out there.
So the song I'm gonna the song is called "I'd Rather Be a Ghost." It's by Semler, and I'm going with some of what the lyrics are and what the feeling of this song is more than what I know I think artist's original intention was, because the song is about a bunch of different things. But the concept in this song is around like presence and being in your body versus like how you're perceived. And I think like I'm thinking about it specifically in relation to like the relation Dean is having to his own sense of like his own humanity and of like deserving to be alive, or like should I actually be dead. And this song, I think, kind of has that feeling. And it's very melancholy. And it was the first song that came to my mind.
Oh, yeah.
So there we go. That's our
I've heard that
chosen
before.
theme song. Is there anything else that you would like to say about this episode, Noah?
I don't think so. I got everything on everything I wrote down. I got to talk about. It was pretty good episode. I mean, it wasn't as funny as I thought it was going to be, but it was a good one. I talked about trauma, talked about a lot of things.
Yeah.
It was good. I love the brothers and their dynamic, so I'm a sucker for that. I'm a fan. Children shouldn't play with dead things. Yeah.
You're like, yeah.
It's cool. Haunting, spooky.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's also kind of poetic, and
it definitely didn't feel like a filler episode.
No.
There was some good character growth with Sam and Dean. It was a good episode. And hey, it was a great time. It's always a blast talking.
Yes.
Love to do it again. Easy.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh no,
today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun. Much love to everyone else.
Thank you. So that's going to conclude our show for today. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to Driver Picks the Podcast wherever you get your shows, and come talk to us by sending in a voicemail or tagging us on Twitter or TikTok or Tumblr. Thank you all for coming along for the ride. We wish you a peaceful road until we meet again. Next week, we are joined by very special guests, Beth and Jamie, who actually share a podcast name with us and are doing their own watch-through show, also called Driver Picks the Podcast. And they're going to come and join me. And we're going to be discussing season 2, episode 5, Simon Said, through the theme of sanctuary. A note to our listeners. This episode was recorded prior to our season 3 name change, where we went from Driver Picks the Podcast to Saving People, Queering Things. For all of our new social media platforms, visit queeringthingspodcast.com.